What if the biggest thing holding you back isn't laziness at all? What if you've spent years calling yourself lazy when the real problem is something completely different? Think about it. Nobody calls themselves lazy when they're scrolling social media for 3 hours, and nobody thinks they're lazy when they're staying up until 2 a.m. watching videos, and nobody feels lazy when they're spending an entire weekend obsessing with a hobby they enjoy. The truth is that lazy people don't usually feel guilty about not doing things. If you're constantly beating yourself up because you're not making progress, chances are you're not lazy. You're just stuck. And understanding the difference can completely change your life. For years, laziness has been used as a catch all explanation for why people don't achieve their goals. They didn't start a business, or they're lazy, didn't lose the weight, lazy, they didn't study enough, lazy, didn't clean the house, lazy. But that's a terrible diagnosis because it ignores what actually happening beneath the surface. And, you know, most of the time, what looks like laziness is really a symptom of something else. It could be fear, the overwhelm, the lack of clarity, and the burnout, or perfectionism, the low energy, constant distractions, or even the simple fact that your environment is working against you. So let's start with the fear. Fear is one of the most powerful forces in the human behavior, yet it often disguises itself as procrastination. You tell yourself you'll start tomorrow, you'll make the phone call later, you'll launch the project next month, but beneath and underneath all those delays is a fear of failure, rejection, or even embarrassment or criticism. And if you never try, you never have to face the possibility that you might not succeed. So your brain creates excuses that feel logical while secretly protecting you from that discomfort. Then there's the overwhelm. Modern life bombards us with the information, the notifications, the responsibilities, and the expectations. And some people aren't avoiding work because they're lazy. They're avoiding it because the tasks, they just feel enormous. And when your brain looks at a mountain of work, it doesn't always respond with motivation. Sometimes it responds with paralysis. And the project's so big that you don't know where to begin, so you do nothing at all. Not because you're incapable, but because your brain can't find a clear entry point. You know, Another hidden culprit is perfectionism. This is one that surprises people because perfectionists are often seen as hard workers. But perfectionism can be one of the biggest productivity killers in existence. When you believe everything must be done perfectly, every task becomes intimidating and you spend more time worrying about, doing something wrong than actually doing it. And as a result, projects that get delayed, opportunities that get missed, and goals remain unfinished. And ironically, perfectionism often creates the exact outcome you're trying to avoid right now. Burnout is another major factor. We live in a culture that glorifies nonstop hustle, work harder, wake up earlier, grind longer, push through. But human beings aren't machines. When you've been running at full speed for months or years without adequate recovery, your motivation starts to disappear. Your focus weakens and your energy, it just drops. Even simple tasks feel exhausting. Many people label themselves lazy when they're actually just exhausted. Their body and mind are sending warning signals, but instead of listening, they pile on more guilt. Distraction also plays a massive role with that. Companies, they spend millions of dollars designing apps, websites, and platforms specifically to capture your attention. Every notification, recommendation, autoplay feature, and endless feed is competing for your focus. Then people wonder why it's difficult to concentrate on long term goals. The reality is that you're fighting against systems engineered to keep you distracted. And that doesn't mean you're powerless, but it does mean the challenge is bigger than simple willpower. Lack of clarity is another issue that gets mistaken for laziness, too. Imagine getting into a car and trying to drive somewhere without knowing the destination. You'd wander aimlessly, and that's exactly what happens when people have vague goals. They say things like, I want to get healthier, or I want to be successful. But what does that actually mean without a clear target? Your brain struggles to organize that action. Clarity creates the moment, and the momentum and the vagueness creates that hesitation. And here's another uncomfortable truth: sometimes the problem isn't you at all, sometimes it's your environment. If you're trying to eat healthy while your kitchen is full of junk food, you're making the process harder. If you're trying to focus while your phone is constantly buzzing, you're creating obstacles. And if you're trying to build productivity habits, like while surrounded by people who discourage that growth, you're fighting an uphill battle. Human behavior is heavily influenced by your environment, often more than people realize. So, how do you fix it? How do you fix it? The first step is stop calling yourself lazy. The labels, they matter. When you repeatedly tell yourself you're lazy, you start building an identity around that belief, and people tend to act in different ways that match their identity. Instead of asking, why am I so lazy? Ask better questions. What am I avoiding? What am I afraid of? And what feels overwhelming? What's draining my energy? And what's distracting me? What obstacles keep showing up? And the second steps takes to make tasks smaller. Make your tasks a lot smaller. That's the second step. Much smaller. Most people underestimate the power of tiny actions. If a workout feels impossible, commit to 5 minutes. If writing a report, feels overwhelming, write one paragraph. If cleaning the house feels exhausting, clean one room. Action creates that momentum, and momentum creates the motivation, not the other way around. Not the other way around. Waiting to feel motivated before taking action, is one of the biggest mistakes that people make. The third step is design your environment for success. Remove that distraction. Make good habits easier. Make bad habits harder. Put the phone in another room. Prepare things in advance and create systems that reduce that friction. Discipline is useful, but environment often beats the discipline before it influences the behavior automatically. And the fourth step is to focus on consistency of intensity. Many people go in for a week, they burn out and then quit. And sustainable progress comes from repeating manageable, actions over long periods of time. Small efforts performed consistently will outperform occasional bursts of extreme motivation almost every time. And finally, practice self awareness instead of self judgment. The goal isn't to make excuses. The goal is to understand what's actually happening here. If your car won't start, yelling at it doesn't fix the engine. The same principle applies to your life. You need an accurate diagnosis before you can create an effective solution. And the next time you catch yourself saying, I'm just lazy, stop for a moment. Okay? Look deeper. Maybe you're scared. Maybe you're overwhelmed. And maybe you're burned out. And maybe you're distracted. And maybe you don't have a clear plan. And maybe you've been fighting an environment designed to pull you away from your goals. Whatever the reason, understanding the real problems give you the power to solve it, because laziness is often the story people tell themselves when they haven't yet uncovered the truth. And once you find that truth, everything starts to change. Thanks for watching today's video. If you found any value in today's video at all, please subscribe. That's all we're looking to do on this channel, is build a subscription base. And without you, we can't do that. And I want to see you tomorrow on the next one. So subscribe if you would. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good day.